say that. Okay. Luckily, most of what I've just talked about is on the screen in the blog. So you haven't missed much if they're doing that. So the considerations are talking about the feasibility. You also look at whether it's technologically feasible. You know, does the technology exist? Does it integrate with what technologies you already have? Things like that. And culturally is actually kind of useful to look at too, which is just things like, are your customers going to accept it? There were issues sometimes, like banking is almost all online and automated now, but a lot of people had a fairly personal view of their, tellers and things. So that's a different thing. In a store, a small town store, do you want to put in the automatic kiosk because half of the, your customers expect the interaction with the clerks, and that's part of the culture of the thing. It's possible that the people will reject what you do if it violates that culture too much. Also, within a company's culture, there are things that you could do that people will just rebel against generally. So how well does it fit into the culture of what you're doing? Okay, so I just did this so you have a half a page overview of systems analysis. This could be like 4 or 5 chapters. Questions on that? What we're going to do is we're going to move from that and talk about the ones that we're going to build together in class and start talking about the database portion of the lock thing. Any questions? All right. Hopefully I'll get a little less discombobulated as I go on. All right. So what I'm going to do, a couple of things here. Let's just, this time I will open a notepad, but we'll add this to the blog, maybe a new blog entry. And I do this on Notepad because I have never mastered switching the camera from the whiteboard to the screen. I know it's doable. So I'm going to format font, and I'm just going to make it really big. 36. Is this big enough?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about, remember, and we can go back to the description in the canvas if we want. We were talking about setting up a security system for a place kind of like here that uses key cards. So in a broad sense, what kinds of components? We're talking about breaking a system into components. So in a very broad sense, just on a brainstorming level, which is not necessarily, this is where you might start. We're going to probably not go a lot deeper into it than that, but even in a real system, you probably would start here. You just start by brainstorming. What are the pieces? Yeah.
People, students, and faculty.
Right, so people, which should be spelled right. So you have students and faculty. There's also
Custodial staff.
Yeah, custodial and security. And you might actually put in, I'll put in the, and by administrators, they could be staff. I mean, it depends on how you want to do it. They're a little bit, so when I'm thinking of this here at the school, a dean or something will have keys to all the rooms in their area of influence. Does that make sense?
Is that still considered staff or not?
Well, so I wouldn't consider them straight staff, but staff, actually, some staff have that permission and some don't. So permissions would be.
Staff would be its own thing, that's different.
Yeah, I think, because it would probably have a little bit different permissions. So we've got different kinds of people. And actually, this will be really relevant in the next assignment when we talk about use cases, because one of the things with a use case is an actor. And an actor is somebody who's going to interact with the system, and we've already defined several. What other parts to this? What?
Different departments.
Possibly.
IT department.
We might need to know what the departments are because the administrator would have. Yeah.
Rooms.
Rooms, yes. You know, because the locks are on rooms. Yeah.
Would it mean different security levels for these cards?
I think so. There's two. I'm going to write that down, but I mentioned there's two kinds of cards, and if we were doing this, we'd have to decide what kind of card we want, right? So I've already kind of have a decision, but let's talk about smart cards. We talked about those a little bit, right? Remember what they are?
So you have a specific number to a specific card, you don't need levels because it will be accessed.
The database will assign the levels, yeah. So on a smart card, it might have the security level, right? Smart cards, the info is on the card. Now, an Orca card is a smart card. It has your the amount of your purse. I think they call it purse on there. It has the last 6 rides you did. It has other information on it. So a smart card has all the info on the card. I don't know if they call them dumb cards. A dumb cards just has a number. Now, one of the dangers of a smart card is if you lose it, you lose all that info, right? Or it has all that info on it. So if you were to do security levels on the smart card and an administrator lost their card, you'd have administrative access. That may also be true with a dumb card because it has its number on it, right? And it's associated with somebody. I'm quite positive that our cards here are the second type. They just have a number. Let's do an asterisk for that. So, but if you're doing analysis, you could decide which way you want to go. I think dumb cards are cheaper. They're more easily replaced. And if you lose them, they don't matter as much. Right. Yeah, I mean, all you have to do is associate somebody with the card number in the database, right? And if they lose the card, you just unassociate them. Did you ever?
There are courses, and like you have a schedule with like courses, different times of day.
So I'm not sure if you care what the course is, although you might. You do care about the time, right?
Time. You only care about the staff, the faculty that's teaching the course.
So you need to know if it's a dumb card, you need to know which card has access to which rooms at which times. A lot of witches there. Anyway, so you need to know in the day, and this is something when we talk about the database, it needs to know that, right? It needs to know which card has access to which rooms at which times. And this is really complicated because there are so many different levels of access. And it's different even like when you talk about faculty. I have access to every room in the IT area. That isn't true like of an English faculty though. They're not going to have access to all the rooms in their area. They have access to only the rooms they're teaching in and only at the times they're teaching, right? So it's different even among faculty. An administrator should be able to open any room in their area, but they generally, like IT faculty, probably could not go up into the fourth floor and open a room in the English area, or a history area. Staff, as I said, it varies. Custodial, I would imagine that they're given an area, and then they can open all the rooms in that area. Although
Why not all the facilities, like on a certain floor? It's like,
so it's possible. I don't know what their access is. I do know here they don't clean classrooms.
You know?
No, because they've been cut back on staff so much. They don't clean. They clean the bathrooms and the halls. Yeah.
It sounds like we need to group rooms in a way that might not have to do with departments.
Right. That's one of the things. So you might want to provide, some grouping of rooms. I had an idea for that, but we can talk about it, see how we come up with this. Other things that you can think of. So the room is sort of a key, and one of the things is, do we talk about it in rooms or do we talk about locks? I'm not sure that it matters, but some rooms, like, there'll be 2 locks, right? So there's the card. I don't know if you want to call them locks or card readers. A card reader here and a card reader on that door. Actually, I'm not sure there is a card reader on that door because it's internal. It looks like it's lockable, but only physically. So I don't. Some rooms, though, I bet have 2 doors. In fact, I know some rooms have 2 doors with 2 locks.
Steve, would there be any reason to assign classes to particular faculty and then the times of those and the location of the room number?
Well, that's how they do it, but what they do is they assign it to the card number. And then the card number is it's actually a dumb card. Card number is attached to a faculty member. Right. So the way if you think of relational things, there's going to be like a people thing, and then there's an association of the person with the card, and then association with the times in the rooms that card has access to.
Associating the times with the people would be easier if someone loses their card.
Yes. And actually, if somebody loses a card, you just basically deactivate that card and give them a new one, right?
And then they could, if the times of the courses are attached to in the database or linked to the person, then the new card will automatically get it.
So you could write software that would do that,
Yeah.
yes. The database wouldn't do that, but
Right.
You could write software that would do that, yes. It would just no. You would have to write software to do that. I'm trying to think of some other things that we would want to happen here. So we've got some rooms. So the security levels is a couple of things. One is the level of the people, their security levels, I suppose. But there's also some rooms have higher security. Can you think of a room or two that might have higher security?
Server room.
The server room for sure, yeah, and computer rooms to some extent. Server rooms, yeah, computer labs, just as I said, to some extent, but the server rooms are the key ones, right? You mess up with those, you mess a lot of stuff up. There might be other things too. Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say, would administrators' offices have different securities?
I don't know why, maybe. I can actually open my administrator's office with my keys. I don't know.
Very comforting.
It's useful when they forget their key.
I suppose I'm thinking that they wouldn't necessarily need access to the rooms, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't necessarily not need weird hours.
Yeah, well, I mean, typically what happens with administrator and with some staff and faculty is that they just, like, faculty have access to their own offices, and they have access to their own offices all the time. So it's not every card access is totally limited by time. So there'd have to be an option in there that's basically, you'd have to say, is it by time? Is it just always? Is it a one-time access? Because you could do that too. As I said, this is really simple system in some ways, but it actually has a lot of complexity. Yeah.
Steve, would there be any situations for emergency opening and or closing or locking of all doors?
That's actually an excellent idea, which I had not thought of.
Or should it stay active shooting?
So I would assume that security would have to have this, where they just could lock down the whole school. That's actually a really good idea, and I had never thought of that.
Fortunately,
Yeah, it should spell emergency right, though. One of the things that I want as part of this system, and it should be a part of any of these, is that it should log all of the access. It should log every swipe at the door, basically.
And like you were saying yesterday, should it also log if or alert if doors are left open for?
Yes, I think so. So log every. I'll just do every swipe, and it should alert if door. Now this gets really subtle because when is it that it should do an alert, right?
the door is open. She gets in the past the closet.
Yeah. So if the door, like this door is often open most of the day because there's people coming in and out.
Because you can't, the door stop doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. If it were to, it never worked very well. If the door were open after hours, that would be maybe an alert. One of the things that I'm pretty sure they do an alert for is if you, and some doors, I mean, this gets the thing though, how detailed do you want to get? Some doors could be open all day. Some doors shouldn't be open very long at all. And if you swipe 3 times and fail, it generates a little alert. I don't think that they generally follow up on them. But, like if you're going around, and I've done this before, will my key open this door? And if you go and do that a lot, they might say, well, what are you doing? So when it logs every swipe, it is logging the card number, right, and the door, or the lock, let's say at the lock, which is associated with the door. So they could come back and say who did it, right? They know who's doing it. One of the problems with the key system is that people were losing keys all the time. And somebody that had a stray key could just, open the door. There was no record of who it was that opened any particular door. They had a person who had been assigned to that key, but because the keys weren't real good at getting back when they were supposed to, it was really hard to say if that person still had control of that key or not. And we did have some here. There were thefts. People would get into a computer lab, and generally they didn't take the computers. They took those things. They cost more than computers, and they're more resellable. That's why they're in a cage. They weren't in cages before. So logging is actually a really important part of the automation of this. Anything else that we're forgetting? I mean, as I said, this is a real simple system, but it's fairly, there are complications here. Enough to make it mildly interesting to develop, I think. So you're looking at that thing. Okay, so questions? Yeah.
People, the students doesn't have the
Students actually don't have any direct access except perhaps,
That's
keys.
changing them.
what?
We'll have a key for the doors.
The keys.
Are they giving students keys for the doors?
I don't know.
Yep.
I'm just asking.
Starts this summer.
And the people who goes to the tutoring,
Tutoring students have access to certain rooms. Tutors have access. And also, I think some student government have access to some rooms. So some students have access. I've noticed this is brand new because they used to just chain all the doors here. But there are a couple of doors now that have key card access. So you can get in on off hours. It used to be just that at 9 o'clock they locked the doors by chaining them all shut, which was a problem. Not 9, 10, whenever they close. Which was a problem because every once in a while somebody got chained inside, and you either slept here or you called the cops to come and help get you out. Sleeping here is not a thing I would advise.
At 9 p.m.
I think it's later than 9. Whenever they close. But now there are key card access doors, so that not every door is chained shut.
They do a certain hour to lock the side doors. You have to put in the front.
Yeah, although I'm not sure it's one of the doors with a key swipe. I think the hallway at the end down here is a key swipe, and I think the one down on Harvard has a key swipe to get in, but I don't think the front doors do. I do know that as later in the day, when or on weekends, sometimes they will lock all the doors except the front door, so they can put security people there. We are, as you probably know, I mean, basically, we're right in the middle of a street with a lot of homeless people, and typically they were sleeping in all the stairwells, and that's one reason they locked everything. And people would sneak in to sleep here at night. I don't blame them, but it's, it was a problem sometimes. Okay, anything else that I'm missing? We could always add things if we are missing things. So this is sort of the parts, and we'll start talking about these in more detail later. And in a way, I'm putting the database a little bit out of sequence, because you'd probably do the use case analysis first, and we're going to do it second. But I'm going to, I wanted to just build a little bit of a database, because there would be a database under this. And this is required in the database track, and there's very little database in this course, so I figured I should do at least some database stuff, right? I'm going to bring up Lucid charts, and we'll try to build a database for this, right? And then we'll talk about a little bit we're not going to actually make the database, although if you really want to, you can. So I'm going to just go to Lucid chart and hope I can remember my password. So log in. Now, generally, as I said, Lucid chart, if you've never used it before, is free as long as you have an EDU. You have to register, though, and it took them about a day to get to me, but most people got in pretty quickly. This is the part.
Be interesting to see what the extra features are of the student account. I just have their free account.
Oh.
With my Gmail address.
I think the free account, does it go away? The free account, I think, had, I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I think it's missing a few pieces.
I'm just gonna end up comparing and contrasting yours
Yeah.
and mine. I'm just curious.
Well, I've been doing things in it for a while, as you can see. I'm going to add a blank diagram. Well, yeah, blank diagram, a new document. And I want a data.
You wouldn't choose from the ERD.
Yeah, ERD is what I want.
So
There it is. I just was not seeing it. And I want a blank ERD. Just looking. Okay, so then I will do create document. They've actually changed this interface since I used it last, which was only a week ago. Because it didn't used to have this title. So since we have a title, let's change that. So let me zoom this too. I think there's a zoom inside here. Yeah. It may be hard to get this all in one frame when we do this, but I want it big enough. So does it let me change this? Yeah.
You can full screen it too.
I can, but I need the toolbox.
Yeah.
So I will do this as, oh, it's not going to, there we go. Security locks? I don't know what to name it. DB. All right. It's hard to navigate big. All right, so it has, because I did an entity thing, it has the entity boxes here. How many of you know, how many of you have done entity relation diagrams? Most of you. If you did the 220, which is, I think, a prereq, you should probably have done it. So I'm going to do the second one here, and I'm just going to pose it here. Ooh, that's big. Maybe don't need to be that zoomed. Come back down. Is that big enough from back there? All right, so what kind of entities? Remember what we have. I'm going to bring the notepad up a bit. We've got like key cards, people, documents. What do we need? Maybe do people first. I'm going to just assume that there is a people key or person. Maybe let's make it person. It's actually, I think it's a better strategy to use single rather than plural on these. So let's do like you could do a person key or person ID. You guys have a preference? All right. I'm going to make that the primary key. And then we need to know, so this is only for here. This database doesn't necessarily need to be a human resources database, right? It's not going to track, we don't necessarily need to know their home address. We probably need to know their name. And it's usually a good idea, though it doesn't always matter, to do like a first name, last name. I'm going to delete the keys here because those are not keys. You can add things to this by, up here there's, you can add above or below. So I'll just click on one of those and it'll add one below. I would do their email. You might do their phone, right?
Yeah.
Oh, there's a thing up here that says below or above. So right here, above, below. You can also delete a row. You can also, if you prefer, you can change the number of fields. Is there anything else we need to know about people?
Just see what keystrokes did you do to put their names under the same box.
Well, they're actually in separate boxes.
Under the separate boxes.
I think you could do a control shift to put them in the same box, but I think it's probably better to have separate boxes. Is there anything else we need to know about a person? Yeah.
If we're doing stuff by department, do we need to know what department they're in, or is this?
Possibly,
That would be managed through relationships.
maybe. I'm trying to think. So if they're only, you might do like position. Does that make sense? Of course, we're assuming everyone will have one position then. Position being like instructor, custodial.
Yeah, I feel like that would be in a different table.
I'm debating it actually.
It might be valuable to have an active and inactive function.
Well, yeah, I would do that on the card, I think. Is the card active? Is the card not active? That makes sense?
I guess I was thinking more specifically in regards to students.
Oh, if we did students.
But it would also work just as well to do it on the card.
Yeah. I mean, because you just, if they're not an active student, you just make this card inactive.
Don't do the card ID.
No, I wouldn't do the card ID here. I would do, I'm going to think about the position for a minute. Let's do, so if we do the card, and I think what I would do, because the card doesn't have any specific information, so what, I'm going to assign the person to the card here. So I'm going to do a card, I guess, ID or number. What do you want? That would be a primary key. And then I'm going to do a person ID. It could be a foreign key. It could be a part of the primary key too if you want. We would probably need to know the date assigned. And we would need to know, what else do we need to know? Status, I guess. What else would we need to know in the card?
Expired.
What?
Expired.
Might have a date. Do we have an expiration date? I'm just wondering, because I've had the same card for 5 years.
At the end of the quarter, maybe, I don't know, maybe a 10th.
Easier to maintain non-return cards.
Yeah, I don't think anybody ever returns the cards. They
So
just
it's just-
deactivate them.
Deactivated at the end of the
Yeah.
automatically.
So the security person would have the ability to just go in there and like switch the status
To not active. But you might also want not only the date assigned, but the date, what do we want to call it, deactivated? There might be a better name for that field.
So it'll be a date in the future that we would deactivate it. Because
Well, no, it could be left null.
Otherwise, somebody's got to check staffing every quarter. You design the database and start answering that.
Well, do you want the date deactivated or just the status?
I'd have a deactivation. allocated for it. Everything's on the next semester.
You could actually, if you're doing it, although this isn't the, I'm not doing the permissions right here. So in the permissions, we would do the card and the room and the time and the date, right? I'll leave it there. Do you guys have any other opinions on that? I mean, there is room for argument on in a lot of these. It's not an absolute thing.
So the card is useless once it's deactivated. Why would you want to track it?
So that you know when it was deactivated. If somebody tries to use a card that's deactivated,
Doesn't work anyway.
but it might show that somebody's trying to break in.
Somebody's not very smart.
Yeah. We could argue. I mean, that's something that could be left out. We're not going to actually build this database anyway. We're just talking through the process. Status. See, the thing is that status wouldn't matter if the deactivated date. If there's only two status, active and not active, a deactivated date would be the same thing as a status null. Just give you a little bit more. So you don't necessarily need both of those. So I'm going to draw that over. See, we have a relationship. One person over time could have many cards. And that could be true because cards cease to function or they lose them. Or so one person, many cards. Although, go ahead.
Is it a default that it does one to many?
It does default to one to many, but you can change them up here. So, like, that's a line style. You can change the endpoints to different things. Oh, I would need to choose it, I think. Select it. And then it gives me the two sides, and I can choose what. As a database topic, I don't care. So when I click on this line, there are lots of different endpoints. There's endpoints with zeros, there's endpoints with lines, there's endpoints with nothing, there's endpoints with double. A lot of these things reflect a thing that's called cardinality. How many connections are required or things. I don't care about that. For one thing, databases don't enforce those. You can do all the designing you want. The database will ignore anything like that. So it's mostly for conceptual stuff. Mostly, and not, because I will have you guys do an ERD, but it'll be simple. All I care is that the one side is the one side and the many side is the many side. So we have a card, right, that has to have permission. So let's bring that. We'll do another ERD. So the permission is really just to open. It's just binary, right? So we don't necessarily need a table of permissions. But I'm going to do card and lock. So actually, maybe before I do that, I would need to set up doors and locks. Do we care about the doors or we only care about the locks? Because the lock is on a door, right? So,
Well, and some doors don't have locks.
right, but they're not going to be in our system, right? Yeah.
But if we
yeah.
made doors, we'd have to account for them. So just locks.
Yeah, so let's just do lock. This will be kind of like a lookup table, right? So I'm going to just do it lock. Each lock will have a lock ID or lock number, whichever you prefer. It'll have a door that it's on. So this would be like the door number. What else would it have? couple things maybe.
Um, Building.
Yeah, actually, that's probably a good idea. It might have, I don't know how security level. That makes sense? Which may or may not be something we should make a lookup table for.
My only question on the lock is, what if you had to change locks?
Then you would just change the lock ID, just put in a new one.
It seemed to slave it to the door.
Well, you could put the door number that the lock. I mean, I actually think it's about the same. If you were to do the door number instead, but you still would probably want to know. I'm not sure how they would do the numbers in the locks. I'm just gonna look at this.
The lock is done, it should be locked for door 31798.
Yeah, although I doubt if it says that. It probably just has a number on it. I don't know that it has a number that is related to the door specifically.
Because if you change the lock, then you just put a different.
You just put a different lock on that door.
Right. And so it reads, okay.
Security level, I'm not entirely sure of. Building, security level. Anything else that we would need to know about the lock? This is where the door, I'm going to put, and I'm not sure I want this here, but we definitely want it in the program eventually. I'm going to put like a status. And status will have two values. You could make it numeric if you want. 0, 1. I'm thinking locked, unlocked, open, closed. So if a lock is supposed to be locked and it has a status of unlocked, then your software can look at that and say they should throw an alert. Does that make sense? And as I said, you could make this a binary, a bit field 0, 1, or you could just say locked, unlocked. In our software that we make for it, I think I'll use the words because it makes for. Yeah.
Foreign key though, right?
So yeah, there's no foreign key in this, unless you have a lookup for security levels. You could, I mean, if you were going to really, you might have a lookup for status, but there's only going to be 2 of them, locked, unlocked. You could, you had a list of all your doors. And again, it is possible that you would want to break out doors as a separate thing. I'm not going to right now, but I could sort of see a logic to doing that. Again, we're not going to build this database except for the design. I just want you to get the idea. Underneath of it all, there would be a database. When we write the code part, which is not going to be a major deal when we buy it, but there will be some code that we write, we will fake the data as opposed to doing a whole database. Right? You can fake the data by just putting it in a list or putting it in a text file. It's fairly easy to fake. So now that I have the card and the log, this is where you grant the permissions. So I would do the card. So do I want, probably, well, let's do card lock ID. I was trying to think of if I want a separate key there. And I want the card number, which is a foreign key. And we also want the lock ID is a foreign key. And then here we would want, so we want probably the date right? So dates, well, you wouldn't want dates. How do we want to do the date and time? Do we have to make a separate table for that? Probably.
You might want a separate table by class. He needs access during that class time.
Yeah, but I think what we'll do, that's based on the lock.
Is there, would there be a reason to have the card ID and the lock ID be a composite foreign key,
You could do that.
like a composite primary key?
My only hesitation with that is that the same card could be associated with the same lock more than once over time.
Oh,
Does that make sense?
yeah.
You could do a composite key with all three of those. I think we need like a detail here. I'll make this smaller, and I will post this. Might even be able to share this with everybody. But I could post it for sure, and then I could share it with everybody too. So I lost my little
Detail.
Yeah, I want a detail for this, which let's say in my horrible naming convention, card lock detail. So in the detail, it would be like card lock detail ID, whatever you want to name it. You don't have to name it what I do. And then I would do card lock ID. And this would repeat more than once. That's why, so that's a foreign key. And then we would have to do, so we've got this lock ID. We'd have to do start time. Well, probably date. Here's what, how do we want to do dates?
Schedule,
What?
schedule,
You want
just
days.
blocks of time.
Yeah, but how do you do that as rows in this columns here?
Just days of the week.
We could do, let's do start date, right? And then days of week. And maybe begin time.
So card lock detail is really looking at.
It's the schedule for it, yeah.
Okay.
What's the keyboard shortcut for when you like made a bunch of rows really quickly?
Oh, what I did is up here where it says fields and there's a number,
Uh-huh.
I just increased the number.
Oh, okay.
I'm uncertain about this still. So what I have here, and then I'll make the relationships here in a moment. I have, for the detail, I have the card lock, start date, days of week, start time, end time. The only problem with this is that it works really good for faculty that are assigned a certain date. But we would need something in there that would say start date, any date, you know, days of week, all. Start time, you know, 7 a.m. or whatever to the end of the day.
I feel like that information is already going to be, if we have like a table for courses, that information is going to already be there.
Except I'm not sure I would do a table for courses.
Oh,
You know, from the lock point of view,
yeah,
it's irrelevant what the course is.
yeah.
It hasn't been my experience in this department with finals, but in other departments, the final schedule can change and be
Right.
variable.
And they would probably have to change the times. My experience, though I haven't been in the regular labs for a long time, is during finals week when the key didn't work and I had to go get somebody open for it.
Yeah. It might not be the scope of what we're doing, but it would be interesting how you would handle that on actual.
Finals are scheduled in advance of the same time.
So theoretically you could do that, but I don't think they bother.
No, I don't think they do, but it makes a frustrating week a little extra frustrating when you're suddenly locked out.
Yeah, I mean, and a couple of things about this. Again, we're not building this database because if we did, it'd be fairly complex. Considering that this is a fairly simple idea, right? Imagine how complex this gets with more complicated ideas. If we don't have classes, because this works really well for faculty, but I think we need something that would allow type of access to be different. You know, type of access, basically you always have access. Or it could be I'm going to add a column to this. So I'm going to say that if the type of access is, and what we would need is probably make this a foreign key. We'd have a lookup table of types of access. But if your type of access is based on times, you're recorded in here. Otherwise, it could say right here, all, or
Custodian.
Yeah, custodian, always, something like that, where it gives you a different structure. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And I'm going to just leave that like that, but probably in real life you would want to make a lookup table of types of access just to be really consistent. Right. So let's hook this together, see what we got so far, and then we'll talk the last little bits of this. And then we can maybe, if you guys don't get started today, that's fine, but we might get started. So I'm going to lock ID to lock ID. These don't have to go field to field, by the way. In most database diagrams, it's just as long as the entities are hooked together. So this is the card number. So this would go from here to there. This is getting ugly really quickly. I will make it smaller and fix it in a minute. And then card lock ID goes over here. I'm going to go small for a second and try to move things around. Not that far off. Although I might just say to organize it in a minute. All right, so let's go back again. Questions? Is this making sense? Again, part of this is to do a little bit of database review, and part of it is to just show you how even the simplest idea can get complicated when you're trying to deal with all of its parts. As I said, the next thing we'll do after we do the database thing, we'll actually do a kind of a step back where we start identifying requirements and using some of the diagramming tools for requirements. What else have we left out? We've got the card, we got the person, we got the lock, we've associated the person with the card, we've associated the card with the lock, we've got some details for the card. There's one big thing I'm thinking that's left out. Anybody know?
Security?
Well, so the security is mostly, I think, fairly binary. They have access or they don't have access. So I'm not sure we need a whole separate security thing, but we haven't logged anything. All right, so we need a log for all of this. And these tables, you know, when you're making a database, these tables may have some hundreds of records, maybe even some few thousands. The log one is probably going to have hundreds of thousands of records or more.
So would you want to go to a separate database?
No, not necessarily. Why would you? Could you actually could, but I wouldn't. I mean, because even these are really not going to be significantly large. And you could dump. Typically, what happens when you have a table that gets really huge, you can dump it every once in a while. You can either dump it into a archive database, or you can just delete it, depending on how important it is. Oops. Go ahead. So let's do a log. And I think for the log, what do we need to log? Let's call it access log. What do we need to log? Yeah.
What the lock ID and the card ID used.
Right, which we actually have up here, right?
Right.
So although it could be that they're using a card that isn't logged there. So you might want to just do card ID, the lock ID. And these would be foreign keys, but they might not link directly to this one in case that they're not the ones that are assigned. So it might link from like here. And then the card is up here. Whoa. Let's just do this.
Card number.
Okay, I can change it to card number. Foreign keys don't have to have the same name, but I think it's a good idea. So we got lock ID. Let's just go down to there. No, that didn't work. I just wanted to unhook it there, but that's okay. Other things that we would want in here? Well, we got that kind of with the card number.
Do you want a date?
You do want a date.
Date and time.
Yeah, you want a date and a time. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make this like a timestamp, right? Which there's lots of different ways to do that in a database. You could do timestamp, you could do date time, but whatever you want the date and the time for every swipe. Is there anything else that we would need in there? Yeah.
It should be like failed or not. Did it unlock or not?
That actually is a good. So.
I mean, because if you wanted to set alerts when somebody fails, you're going to need
right.
that recognizes that it failed.
I'm trying to think of how to specify that.
Unapproved access.
Well, so I think we have status up here, but I wonder if the status should be right here, open, closed.
What is status mean?
I'm thinking status is locked or unlocked. Maybe the status makes more sense. I'm thinking, is the door locked or unlocked?
I think it actually status should probably stay there, but then you need to have something on the actual access log that says, was this card able to unlock the door?
Yeah, success fail.
Be it like success or fail.
All right, we could add success fail.
Because status would also be important to have on the actual lock, because what if there's like a mechanical error or the power goes off? And so,
Okay.
you know, you need something that says, what's the current status of the door? Or of the lock? Is it locked or unlocked? As opposed to.
I'm trying to think of how to name this success.
Authorized, and then a Boolean value?
That actually works. Authorized. So you would leave the status. So status, there might be a lookup thing if there's more than open, locked, and unlocked, because there could be inactive too,
Yeah. System down.
or broken. Yeah. I don't know if you could hack one of those locks. You probably could.
Probably. Probably be easier to hack a card, frankly.
To just steal a card, yeah.
Just steal a card.
So let's look at what we got so far. I'm going to go to the full screen view, although it tends to go small when we do that. I want full screen. Where is full screen? This one?
Yep.
Oh, still. So, and then maybe,
You can also do that for 11.
I'm just trying to get it to where it kind of is all in there.
At 11.
Does that do it to where it's all in there?
Well, just full screen. It'll full screen the browser.
Which I think it is. I was just trying to get this in screen where it's big enough to see, but still in screen.
So you need to get back to your frame and to zoom out.
Well, I could do that. Although, all right, so let's. I think that's everything, though. All right, so this is just, as I said, the database part that we're doing. Does that make sense? I mean, it's fairly. You have a thumbs up. Who else? Does it make sense in terms of the thing? Yeah.
Don't we also need the security level of the card?
The card, I think. So type of access is where I was thinking of doing that. Does that make sense? I don't see it as a high, so if you were a security person, I would say type of access equals something like all. Right? You have access to all of it. If you were, so there might be, this is probably going to be a lookup. We didn't do it as a lookup here, but you probably want to look up for what the types of access are. All or, area. If you have access to an area, although actually that's just going to translate into your card has access to a certain number of rooms. But if it's an area, it means it won't be here in the time. Right? If the type of access is that it's, I don't know what you want to name it, time-based access, then they're not here in the detail.
Steve, can you just confirm you can have lock IDs? Is it 2 primary keys connected?
Where do I have 2 primary keys?
Lock primary key to below lock ID primary key. Log ID.
Oh, so this is going to be a foreign key. It's not hooked to this field. One of the things about these, I was kind of hooking to fields, but in general with the entities, it's just hooked to the entity. It's not hooked to, like if you do these in active, like in SQL Server or MySQL, it doesn't hook to the field. It just hooks to the box. Does that make sense?
It does. It's not what it showed. Okay. Because these it goes by the hot button.
It can, and it would probably make more sense if I did that. But I just say in most of these diagrams, That's actually not how they work usually. So I can move this if it will let me move it. Okay. Usually the only time there's a hook from a primary key to a primary key is if they're the same key. All right, so a couple of things I will do. I will put this into the blog, and so we will do, it's called blank ERD. That won't work, I guess. I thought I named it. I guess I just titled it. What do you want? I guess lock security ERD. I'm going to save that, and I'm going to get a shareable link, and I'll put this into the blog along with a picture of this and the other stuff we discussed. So can I get out of here? So I'm going to add these to the blog. Actually, for right now, I'm just going to paste that there. And I'll get the picture here in a moment. Let's go back real quickly to the assignment. Am I still, why is it not? Oh, I know, I'm full screen. I want to go F11 to get out of there. And I will go to the, so let's look at the very first assignment. And we can talk about it. So Lucid Charts is probably your best bet to do this. I have accepted hand-drawn things with a phone photograph before, but I'd rather do it at Lucid Charts. You can share it with me on Lucid Charts, right? Boy, I just did get a shareable link. So this is for doing the one for the, did I say what program? Use Lucid Charts to create something that would underlie the food kiosk. So you guys remember, if you think about the McDonald's one, or Costco, what kind of database would underlie that? And I'm not going to be too strict. We'll talk about it after people give it a shot. And you're welcome to work in groups on this, even though it's an individual assignment. So you could, if 2 or more people worked on the same Lucid chart, you could both turn in the link, whatever. That makes sense. As I said, I'm not going to be hypercritical of these. I just want you to think through what kind of data would underlie that. Now, if you've never seen one, how many have seen these? Because most of you don't eat at McDonald's, probably.
Google it, probably.
What?
You would Google it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could Google it. Did we have it Google? McDonald's kiosk? What did they call?
Just McDonald's kiosk.
I work at Domino's and we have them there.
I think they're becoming more and more. So let's see.
Self-service. Oh, that's it.
Yep. I'm just seeing if I can get a, can I make that picture bigger?
Look at the images.
No, thanks. So let's go back. Images. Whoa, lots of them. So if you look at these, they have, you know, all of the sandwiches. They have all of the variations of the sandwiches. They have, and then basically they're touch screens, right? You just touch what you want. You can customize everything. As I said, the only time I ever, they had jury duty, and if you've ever had jury duty in Pierce County, it's downtown Tacoma. The only restaurant close by is McDonald's. So all the people that are being tried, as well as all the people that are going to be on the juries, go there, right? So, but they have these kiosks, and basically you can choose what you want, choose your drinks, customize everything.
Do you pay for it there too?
If you're paying electronically, you can pay for that there. If you're not paying electronically, you can click pay at the counter, and you can pay with cash at that point. It doesn't take cash. It just takes cards, but you can do your order and then click pay at counter. I mean, partially when I look at things like that, and I realize this is a disease, but when I look at things like that, I think, how did they program that? What did they do?
It looks like a giant mobile app.
I think it is. It is similar to a mobile app. I don't think that it's probably inherently super complex, although there's a lot of little, I mean, the fact that you can customize orders, the fact that it does the price, although McDonald's prices are pretty standardized. They don't do too much. Even the customizations have been kind of pre-structured. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So I work at Domino's, and we have like something similar to that, where what it appears to be is a custom version of the website that then just goes through the online ordering system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Something else on top of that for like typing in your name and stuff.
Yeah, here you don't have to log in or anything.
Yeah, you don't have to do it on there either, but you're able to put in a phone number for like certain details if you want to have it like attached to your account, but you don't have to.
That's interesting. They
Yeah.
don't do that here, but I don't think McDonald's keeps any accounts. Domino's does because you can order over the phone.
Yeah.
And then when you, and I think they use the phone number as a key in their database.
Yeah, they have that for their rewards.
That's fairly typical for the database. If you wanted to do it Domino's when you do these assignments, you're welcome. I was just thinking that this is something that is not super complicated, but might have enough interesting features to not bore you to tears. Does that make sense? Because there's some things we could do that are hyper complicated that would, we could barely touch by the end of the quarter. And then there are things that are too simple. I was trying to look for things that are, not too terrible. That being said, as we go through, I've never done this one before, so we'll see if it works. One of the things I have done before, which I suppose we could substitute at this point if you wanted, is the self-checkout at the grocery stores. Because there's a fair amount of complexity there too, because things are sold by different, sold by weight, sold by volume, sold by bar tag. They're also, some things have limits, like you have to have an instant alert if there's alcohol. There are other kinds of alerts. There are limits. These days, you really can't buy Sudafed except at the pharmacy, can you?
Spray paint has an alert on it.
What?
Spray paint.
Spray paint, yeah.
If you go to Freddy's, you can buy spray paint and your groceries.
Fertilizer can have. I don't know that they do. Nitrogen fertilizer makes good bond. So, the kiosk is another kind of thing very similar to this. The kiosk of self-checkout.
Can you buy cigarettes? Can you alert the attendant?
The attendant can give you the cigarettes, but I don't think it. They might add it to. They might add it to the bill there too. So one of the things that's in here too, if you're thinking about it, although in a database you wouldn't do this, this would be in the software, is it has to calculate your totals, how much is due. So when we do the software, there'll be that kind of calculation. So if somebody, if you wanted to substitute Domino's, you could. If you really wanted to do the kiosks at the stores, you could do that instead. But I think the principle of all of them is somewhat similar. And I hadn't thought, there's room for developing this because I haven't thought it through entirely.
Open-ended.
Yes. And ultimately, as I said, we'll do this database design. That's a one-off. That's just to give you some refresher on database. And then we'll develop all of the use cases, which go through the requirements. And we'll do some flow charts for how you would do certain things. And we'll do some classes to figure out what your objects would be in the code. We'll write a couple of those objects. We'll probably take some subsystem that's fairly discrete and do some coding for that, and then do some tests on that. And I'll also show you how to do sequence diagrams that show how all your classes talk to each other. So I will let you guys start it if you want.
That's the one that's doing the 14th.
Yeah, you got time for the database thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
12.
The 12th, I think, yeah.
Thank you.
Which is a while, because I didn't know how long it would take us to get going. So if we get ahead of schedule, that's great. If we get behind schedule, I'll never make you turn your assignments in before the due date. In fact, I don't care too much. I don't grade on dates, although again, I would like to reiterate, which I do every quarter, please don't turn everything in finals week. People do, and I'm not sometimes not as kind, but sometimes I am. If you turn them in before finals week, you do have the advantage that if I find things wrong, you can fix it, right? And what we will do once you guys have the ERDs is we'll talk about them, and then we'll move on to the next thing. Okay, so I'm going to kill the video, and I'm going to set up the blog, and then any questions? As I said, if this isn't something you want to work on, you can tell me we can adjust it a little. But I think it could be interesting, and more programming is going into devices and things like this. Cars, refrigerators. Actually, things like Alexa, although Alexa isn't really so it's basically just a portal to other software, right? It's basically just a portal to an AI and a search engine. But you can write routines for them. So I personally don't own a smart speaker. I'm not sure I ever will, but that's a different issue.
Steve, should we approach this by doing a user interface scenario?
We will be doing that, but I think look at it mostly from the database point of view for right now, right?
So for example, I was wondering, so you have to have someone like the person on the other.
So that's part of the system, although
Yes, I don't know.
I don't think that would be database so much. The database is going to have things like the menu. Sure. There could be a log. I bet there's a log at every order. And there's probably a menu. Basically, the menu is probably there.
So we can't overdo the designs.
Yeah. So let's see. Kill the video.